My name is Rachel Williams, 34, and I'm a single mom to my wonderful 10-year-old daughter, Emily. My sister Melissa's engagement celebration was meant to be a chance for our family to reconnect, maybe even heal old wounds. I had spent weeks getting Emily ready, teaching her the ins and outs of proper etiquette for such a fancy event. Little did I know, a simple spilled drink would turn into a disaster that tore our family apart. Before diving into the story that would change everything, let me know where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe if you've ever found yourself standing up to your own family to protect your child. Life has never been smooth sailing for Emily and me. When she was just 3, her father, Daniel, walked out on us, saying he wasn't prepared to be a parent. Just like that, he vanished, leaving me to figure out how to be both mom and dad while managing my career as an elementary school teacher. Every day became a balancing act, grading papers late at night, planning parent-teacher conferences around my own teaching schedule, and making every dollar stretch to cover Emily's needs. But despite the struggles, Emily and I built a cozy, colorful life together. Our small 2-bedroom apartment became our haven, decorated with Emily's artwork and photos of our adventures. We created little traditions: pancake breakfasts every Sunday, monthly movie nights complete with popcorn, and summer picnics at the local park. Every year that passed, our bond only grew stronger. Melissa, however, lived a different life entirely. 2 years younger than me, she had always been our parents' golden child. While I got sensible gifts and was told to be practical, she was showered with designer clothes and endless praise for her charm and connections. When I struggled to pay for college by juggling part-time jobs, our parents covered Melissa's tuition at an elite university without a second thought. After graduation, Melissa's career soared thanks to our father's connections. She landed a position at a prestigious marketing firm. Meanwhile, I continued in my role as a teacher, nurturing young minds. Family gatherings often turned into subtle contests. Melissa's latest promotion compared to my steady but modest career, her high-rise apartment against my humble rental, her exotic trips versus our weekend beach outings. Though my parents never outright said they were disappointed in me, their glowing praise for Melissa's achievements made their feelings clear. Then came James Sullivan. Son of a wealthy local businessman, James had everything our parents valued: money, ambition, and a polished image. When Melissa announced they were dating, my parents were thrilled. Family dinners became all about James, his business ventures, his family's influence, while Emily's report cards or my students' accomplishments rarely earned more than a nod. "Your sister really knows how to pick them," my mother once remarked while we were washing dishes after a family dinner. "James has such promise. It's a pity about Daniel, but maybe next time you'll choose someone with more stability." Her words cut deep, suggesting my failed marriage was just a poor decision on my part, not a heartbreak I'd endured. Despite these tensions, I tried to keep the peace. Emily deserved to know her aunt and grandparents, no matter the differences. I swallowed the snide remarks about my parenting, Emily's clinginess, my practical teacher clothes, the suggestion that I should pick up a side job to start saving for Emily's college fund. So when Melissa called to announce her engagement 6 months ago, I truly congratulated her. Maybe this new chapter would soften her edges. When she invited us to the engagement party, I allowed myself a little hope that we could finally bridge the gap. "This is an exclusive event, Rachel," Melissa had emphasized on the phone. "James's family invited important people. Emily will need to be on her absolute best behavior." "Of course," I replied, ignoring the underlying insult. "Emily's excited to celebrate with her aunt." In the weeks leading up to the event, I did my best to prepare. Though money was tight, I bought a navy cocktail dress from the clearance rack at a department store. Nothing fancy, but still nice. For Emily, I found a sweet little dress with floral embroidery. We practiced table manners and talked about what to say at a fancy event. "Remember, honey, this is Aunt Melissa's big day," I said. While brushing Emily's hair that morning, "There will be a lot of grown-ups talking about grown-up things. If you get bored, just stay by me, okay?" Emily nodded solemnly, her wide blue eyes shining with determination. "I'll be really good, Mom. I won't mess up." "You could never mess up, sweetheart," I whispered, kissing her head. As we drove to the country club where the party was being held, Emily chattered excitedly about the day ahead, how it felt like a princess party, how she hoped her grandparents would like her dress. Her excitement was contagious, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe this day could go smoothly. Absolutely. Let's continue with Part 2. The engagement party and the spill incident. Here's the revised version of that section. As we neared the sprawling country club, I felt a knot of nerves settle in my stomach. The entrance was lined with towering trees and luxury cars. Mercedes, BMWs, and even a couple of Bentleys filled the parking lot. My aging Honda looked hopelessly out of place as I pulled into a tight spot near the back. "Wow, Mom, it looks like a castle," Emily whispered in awe, her hands pressed to the car window. I glanced at her eager expression in the rearview mirror, taking a deep breath before responding. "It does, doesn't it? Ready for an adventure?" "Ready?" she beamed, unbuckling her seatbelt with a sense of purpose that made me smile despite the butterflies in my stomach. If only I had known what lay ahead, I might have turned the car around. But hope has a way of blinding us to what's coming. Inside, the country club was the picture of elegance. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above the marble floors, and enormous windows framed meticulously manicured gardens. The air was thick with the scent of white roses and orchids. A uniformed attendant at the door checked invitations, adding to the formality. Emily squeezed my hand tightly as we entered. "It's like a fairy tale," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Rachel, you made it." Melissa greeted us without much warmth, her tone clipped. She wore a designer white dress, likely worth more than my rent for the next 3 months. Her diamond ring sparkled as she gestured vaguely at the gift table. "You're 15 minutes late," she noted, her eyes flicking to my dress. "Traffic was a little worse than expected," I replied, leaning in for a polite cheek kiss. "Congratulations, Melissa. Everything looks beautiful." Melissa gave me a tight smile, her gaze already moving past me to scan the room. "That dress is interesting. Navy for a spring engagement?" Before I could answer, Emily stepped forward, holding out a small gift bag. "Happy engagement, Aunt Melissa. We got you a present." Melissa's glance at Emily was brief and cool. "Thank you. Just place it on the table over there." She pointed dismissively toward the growing pile of gifts. She barely acknowledged Emily before turning to greet another guest. Emily's smile wavered slightly, but she held her head high. "Should we find Grandma and Grandpa?" she asked, her voice bright but tentative. "Let's do that," I agreed, guiding her carefully through the sea of guests and servers carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. We found my parents near the bar. My father impeccably dressed in a new tailored suit, my mother in an outfit I'd seen featured in a recent fashion magazine. "Rachel," my mother greeted with a perfunctory hug before turning her full attention to Emily. "My goodness, look how tall you're getting. Are you eating enough vegetables? You look a bit pale." Emily responded politely. "Hi, Grandma. Hi, Grandpa. Your dress is really pretty." "Thank you, dear. It's Valentino," my mother replied, clearly pleased. She then turned her critical eye to me. "Rachel, you should circulate. James's father is the CEO of Sullivan Development. Half the city is practically his. It wouldn't hurt to make a few connections." My father nodded. "Teaching is fine, Rachel, but with your situation, you should be thinking about more lucrative paths." I bristled at the word situation. "Emily and I are doing well, thank you," I replied, my voice tight. "Of course," my mother responded dismissively, already looking for the next socialite to impress. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" I asked Emily, noticing a table with kid-friendly snacks nearby. She nodded, and we made our way over, weaving between groups of people engaged in lively conversation. Along the way, a woman in an elegant pantsuit paused to smile at us. "What a lovely daughter you have. Those curls are natural, I assume?" I was momentarily caught off guard by her kindness. "Yes, they are, thank you." "I'm Catherine Foster, James's aunt," she introduced herself, extending a hand. "I'm Rachel, and this is my daughter, Emily." "Well, it's a pleasure to meet you both. It's refreshing to see a child at one of these rather stiff gatherings." Catherine winked at Emily, who grinned back. "By the way, the chocolate-dipped strawberries are excellent." she added conspiratorially before moving along. I like her, Mom, Emily whispered. Me too, I agreed, grateful for the rare moment of warmth in the chilly atmosphere. But the calm was fleeting. As we helped ourselves to snacks, I noticed James's parents watching us from across the room, their eyes sharp and assessing. James's mother whispered something to her husband, both clearly disapproving. Melissa didn't mention a child would be here, a woman nearby murmured, loud enough for me to hear. I gently nudged Emily toward a quiet corner, hoping to shield her from the subtle but stinging undercurrent of judgment. Eventually, Melissa and James stood at the front of the room as James's father gave a glowing toast, extolling James's achievements and their family's prestigious legacy. Not once did he mention our side of the family, though my parents stood beaming nearby. Melissa followed with her own speech, thanking James's family for their support and her colleagues for their encouragement. She offered only a cursory mention of our parents for always pushing me to strive higher, her eyes never once flickering to where Emily and I stood. Emily tugged my sleeve gently. Mom, can I get some more punch? She whispered, holding up her empty glass. Of course, sweetheart, let's go. We navigated through the crowd toward the punch table. Emily careful and steady, gripping the glass with both hands as I reminded her gently, 2 hands, sweetie. It's busy in here. I know, Mom. I'll be careful, she promised, her face focused. But as we turned to make our way back, a man gesturing wildly in conversation backed up abruptly, knocking into Emily. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The man barely noticed, but the nudge was enough. Emily's punch spilled, a splash of red arcing through the air before landing squarely on the pristine white fabric of Melissa's designer dress. The room fell eerily silent. Emily froze, her wide eyes filling with horror as she whispered, I'm so sorry, Aunt Melissa. It was an accident. But Melissa's gaze was locked on the bright stain spreading across her dress, her face a mask of shock that quickly twisted into fury. You clumsy little brat, she shouted, her voice sharp and cutting. And before I could react, her hand swung out. The sound of the slap cracked through the room. Of course, let's move forward with Part 3, covering the moment after the slap, the confrontation, and the immediate fallout. Here's the rewritten version of that section. The sharp sound of Melissa's slap seemed to hang in the air, freezing everyone in place. Emily stumbled backward, her small body crumpling to the floor as the glass she'd been holding rolled across the polished marble. For a moment, the world stopped. I stood there frozen in disbelief, my mind struggling to catch up with what I had just seen. My sister, my own flesh and blood, striking my 10-year-old daughter so hard that she fell. Emily's face crumpled in pain and confusion. One hand pressed to her cheek as silent tears streamed down her face. The red mark already blooming on her skin mirrored the bright stain on Melissa's dress, a grotesque symmetry that made my stomach twist. I dropped to my knees beside Emily, gathering her into my arms. Her small body trembled against mine. Oh, sweetheart, let me see. I gently pulled her hand away, my heart breaking at the sight of the angry imprint of fingers across her cheek. Around us, the room had erupted into a flurry of shocked whispers. Some guests gasped audibly. A few others had their phones raised, capturing the scene on video. James stood off to the side, frozen, his face pale with shock and discomfort. Melissa, however, was seething. Look what she did to my dress! She screeched, gesturing wildly at the ruined fabric. This was a custom Vera Wang. It's destroyed! She's a child, I said firmly, my voice low but shaking with fury. It was an accident, and you hit her. She's been running around all evening like this is a playground, Melissa shot back, her tone dripping with disdain. This is exactly why kids don't belong at formal events. James hesitated, placing a hand on Melissa's arm as if to calm her. Mel, maybe let's... Don't you dare take their side! She snapped, jerking her arm away. My dress is ruined, and so are the photos. Everything is ruined. I was about to respond when my parents pushed through the crowd, their expressions tight with concern. But not for Emily. Oh no, your dress, my mother gasped, inspecting the stain as if Emily's tears were invisible. Rachel, this is exactly why you don't bring a child to a formal event, my father said, his tone stern and condescending. Some occasions aren't suitable for kids, especially ones who haven't been taught proper manners. His words hit me like a slap of their own, stinging and cold. My daughter was on the ground, hurt and crying, and they were worried about a dress. "She was bumped," I replied, my voice rising, my hands shaking as I helped Emily to her feet. "She said she was sorry, and Melissa, she hit her. Hard enough to knock her down?" "It was barely a tap," my mother dismissed with a wave of her hand. "Don't be so dramatic, Rachel. Emily's overreacting just like you always do." Emily clung to me, her sobs quiet but desperate. The red mark on her cheek had darkened, the outline of fingers unmistakable. My father's voice rose, addressing the surrounding guests as if delivering a lecture. "This is what happens when a child is raised without proper discipline. Rachel has always been too soft, too indulgent." Something inside me snapped. For years, I'd tolerated their criticisms, their dismissals, their constant comparisons between me and Melissa. I'd kept quiet, tried to keep the peace. But as I looked at my daughter's tear-streaked face, I realized enough was enough. "Emily was bumped by someone else," I said clearly, forcing my voice to stay calm. "She apologized immediately, and in response, her aunt slapped her across the face. That's not a tap. That's assault." A hush rippled through the crowd as my words landed. Even some of Melissa's friends looked uneasy, their eyes darting between her furious face and the red imprint on Emily's cheek. James's mother stepped forward, her voice smooth and patronizing. "Perhaps it's best if you take Emily home. We wouldn't want to ruin Melissa and James' special evening." "Take her and leave, Rachel!" Melissa spat, her voice sharp as glass. "You've done enough damage!" "Damage?" I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. "She spilled a drink. You hit a child." Two security staff appeared, drawn by the escalating tension. The taller guard looked between me and Melissa. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," Melissa snapped before I could speak. "My sister and her daughter are causing a scene. They need to leave." The guard's gaze shifted to me, lingering on Emily's tearful face and the red mark on her cheek. His expression softened. "Ma'am, would you like to step outside for a moment?" I could feel the pressure building, the expectation that I would slink away quietly, avoiding further embarrassment. But something inside me, an unfamiliar fierce certainty, refused to back down. "No," I said clearly, my voice firm. Emily's small hand tightened around mine. "We're not leaving. I'd like to report an assault." The word hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd, and Melissa's face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Assault?" she sputtered. "You can't be serious. It was a slap. She ruined my dress." The guard's posture straightened, his tone suddenly more official. "Ma'am, did someone strike this child?" "Yes," I answered, my arms protectively wrapped around Emily. "My sister slapped her across the face, hard enough to knock her down." "Absolutely." Here's part 4, where the police arrive, the situation escalates, and the family dynamics unravel further. Let's keep the 10% rephrasing consistent while preserving the original flow. The security guard's face tightened with concern. "Understood. We'll need to get the authorities involved." Before I could say another word, my mother's voice cut through the tension, sharp and dismissive. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Rachel, you're being absurd. It was just a little discipline." "Discipline is not slapping a child hard enough to leave a mark," I said evenly, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "You don't get to call that parenting. It's assault, plain and simple." "She ruined Melissa's dress," my father barked, his voice booming across the room. "And you're making a scene." "No," I replied, my tone low but firm. "Melissa made the scene when she hit a 10-year-old girl." At that moment, James's mother stepped in, her tone dripping with polished condescension. "Perhaps we can handle this quietly as a family. There's no need to escalate matters further, surely." But I wasn't backing down. This is already escalated. My daughter was struck by an adult, by her own aunt no less. I won't pretend this didn't happen. Emily, still holding my hand tightly, spoke up, her voice small but strong. "She hit me really hard. I said I was sorry, but she slapped me." That simple statement seemed to crack the polished veneer of the room. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Others looked at Melissa with a mixture of shock and quiet disapproval. Then, a calm, authoritative voice broke through the murmurs. "Is the child injured?" Two uniformed police officers had arrived, ushered in by the security guards. One officer, a woman in her 40s with a steady gaze, approached us directly. "Yes," I answered, my voice steady. "She has a handprint on her cheek where she was slapped by my sister." The officer knelt to Emily's level, her tone gentle. "Hi there, sweetheart. My name is Officer Lopez. Can I take a look at your face?" Emily nodded shyly, turning her cheek to reveal the still visible outline of fingers. Officer Lopez's eyes narrowed slightly. "Thank you, Emily. That was very brave." She straightened and addressed me. "Ma'am, can you walk me through exactly what happened?" As I recounted the events, the second officer took notes. I kept my tone clear, factual, holding my emotions at bay. As I spoke, I noticed Catherine Foster, James's aunt, watching the scene intently from across the room. "I have a video," Catherine called out, stepping forward with her phone in hand. I recorded part of the incident and the aftermath, including the threats made toward Rachel and her daughter. "Threats?" the second officer asked sharply, looking up from his notepad. Catherine nodded. "They threatened her job, her reputation, even implied that she could lose her career if she pursued this." The officer's expression darkened. "We'll definitely need to review that." While the officers gathered statements, I saw James standing off to the side, looking deeply uncomfortable. His gaze flickered to Emily's tear-streaked face, and then to Melissa, who was now in full damage control mode, her voice pitching higher as she spoke rapidly to the officers. "It was a misunderstanding," she exclaimed, her hands fluttering. "I would never intentionally hurt my niece. I just reacted without thinking. It was instinct. I didn't mean to hurt her." "That may be," Officer Lopez replied evenly, "but the fact remains that you struck a child with enough force to leave a visible injury." "It was barely a tap," my mother cut in dismissively. "In our day, children were expected to behave. A little correction never hurt anyone." "Ma'am," Officer Lopez said, her tone firm but polite, "hitting a child hard enough to knock them down is not considered acceptable discipline. It's classified as assault." Melissa's face had turned pale, her lips pressed into a thin line as she realized the gravity of the situation. My father's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing at me like I was the problem, not the one trying to protect my daughter. "Let's take this outside," the officer suggested, glancing at the growing crowd of onlookers. Before I could respond, Melissa hissed at me under her breath, her voice low and dangerous. "You're going to regret this, Rachel. You're tearing this family apart." I met her gaze squarely. "No, Melissa. You did that when you hit my child?" As we were led toward the side of the room, James quietly approached, his expression conflicted. "I'm sorry, Rachel," he said quietly, his voice tight. "I didn't know Melissa could be like this. I should have stepped in." I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. Officer Lopez turned to me as we reached the hallway. "Ma'am, would you like to press charges?" The words settled in the air like a final decision. I looked down at Emily, her cheeks still red, her eyes shining with tears, but also something else. Hope. Hope that her mom would stand up for her. "Yes," I said clearly, my voice strong and unshaken. "I would. Absolutely." Here's Kakir, Part 5, covering the aftermath, the legal consequences, and the family's reaction. Let's maintain that careful 10% rephrasing while keeping the heart of the story intact. The tension in the air was palpable as Officer Lopez quietly handed me a card with the case number and contact information for follow-up. She explained the process clearly. Melissa would be cited for simple assault on a minor, a misdemeanor that could carry fines, probation, or even jail time. "This is a formal charge," Officer Lopez said, her voice steady and professional. "Given the evidence, including the witness accounts and the visible injury, we're obligated to proceed." I nodded, my arm wrapped protectively around Emily, who leaned into me, her small body still shaking slightly. Nearby, my mother looked like she had swallowed a lemon, her lips pursed so tightly they nearly disappeared. My father, however, turned to me with a cold fury that I'd felt too many times before. "This is disgraceful, Rachel. Your sister's entire future, her career, her engagement. You're destroying it all over a small misunderstanding." I met his gaze head on, something I hadn't dared to do in years. "A misunderstanding? She hit my daughter, hard enough to leave a mark. That's not a misunderstanding, Dad. That's abuse." Melissa's eyes flashed with panic as she clutched at James's arm, pleading quietly, "Tell them, James. Tell them it wasn't a big deal." James's face was pale, his mouth opening and closing as if struggling for the right words. "Melissa," he said quietly, his voice unsure, I I think we should just let the officers handle this." For a moment, it looked like Melissa might snap at him too, but then she clamped her mouth shut, her shoulders rigid. As the officers gathered final statements, I became aware of the silent, watchful eyes of the guests. Some whispered to each other, clearly disturbed. A few, I noticed, were recording with their phones, capturing the scene unfolding. Melissa's tear-streaked face, Emily's red cheek, my parents' cold expressions, and my own determined stance. Catherine Foster, standing near the back, caught my eye again. She gave me a small, approving nod. "Thank you," I mouthed quietly. Once the officers finished their initial questioning, they informed us that Melissa would need to appear in court. They also suggested I consider a restraining order to protect Emily from further contact. My parents were furious. My mother hissed, "A restraining order against your own sister? Are you really that vindictive?" I kept my voice calm, though my hands trembled slightly. "It's not about punishment. It's about making sure my daughter is safe. That's my priority now and always." Melissa glared at me, her voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this. You think you're protecting her, but you're ruining your own life. You'll never work in this district again. Do you have any idea how many school board members James's family knows?" Her threat was clear, but something inside me, perhaps the same fire that had pushed me to call 911 in the first place, sparked again. "Is that a threat, Melissa?" I asked, my voice cold and deliberate, loud enough for the officers to hear. James blanched, his mouth tightening as he seemed to realize the weight of her words. "Enough," Officer Lopez interjected, her tone firm. "This conversation is over. If anyone has further concerns, they can raise them during the legal proceedings. For now, let's give Rachel and her daughter some space." James's father, who had been watching quietly with a frown, stepped forward as we were preparing to leave. His voice was smooth but carried an edge. "You're making a very serious accusation, young lady. Be careful. Sometimes these things don't end well for people who stir up trouble." The implied threat landed, but I met his gaze with a steely calm I hadn't known I possessed. "I'm not afraid of you," I said quietly. "Not anymore." With that, Emily and I left the party, her small hand gripping mine, our heads held high, walking out past the murmurs and stares, past the shattered family image that had crumbled so spectacularly that night. Absolutely. Let's proceed with Part 6, where the legal case progresses, Melissa's engagement unravels, and Rachel begins to find her footing. Here's the rewritten version of this part. The days after the party felt like a whirlwind, a surreal blur where the weight of everything settled hard on my shoulders. By Sunday, a video of the aftermath had surfaced online, showing Melissa's screaming, the red mark on Emily's cheek, and the arrival of the police. It spread quickly, first among local circles, then gaining attention in regional news outlets. The comments were overwhelmingly in support of my decision to protect Emily. Parents, teachers, and strangers alike chimed in, sharing their own stories of standing up against family abuse. My phone buzzed nonstop, reporters requesting interviews, distant relatives reaching out with either support or scorn, and a few concerned parents from my school checking on Emily's well-being. I ignored the calls I didn't recognize, choosing instead to focus on Emily, who needed time to process. We spent Monday at home, resting and talking, with me reassuring her over and over that none of this was her fault. That afternoon, I took her to see a child therapist, Dr. Bennett, a kind woman with a gentle demeanor and a warm smile. Dr. Bennett listened as Emily spoke softly about the party, nodding thoughtfully. Afterward, she told me, "Emily is resilient, but it's vital that she feels safe and validated. She needs to know her feelings matter and that you're here to protect her. You're doing the right thing, Rachel. Her words offered a glimmer of comfort in an otherwise stormy sea. By Tuesday, news arrived that Melissa had been placed on administrative leave from her marketing firm. The company, known for its family-first image, clearly didn't want to be associated with viral footage of one of their executives slapping a child. My mother's voicemail arrived that evening, her tone cold and biting. Rachel, I hope you're happy. Your sister's career is in jeopardy, her engagement might not survive, and you've created a spectacle. I truly hope this was worth it. I deleted the message without replying. For the first time, I felt no obligation to defend myself. Back at school, I braced for the worst. But when I walked into the building Wednesday morning, I was met with unexpected kindness. The principal, Dr. Washington, called me into her office. Rachel, I want you to know the district stands behind you, she said firmly. We've had a few calls from individuals who seem invested in this matter, but we're not swayed by pressure tactics. Your personnel file is restricted for now as a precaution, but we've reviewed your record. You've done nothing wrong. Relief flooded through me. I managed to hold back tears, but only barely. Thank you, I whispered. Your job is secure, she added. And more than that, I'm proud of you for protecting your daughter. Emily, too, returned to school on Thursday. A little nervous, but determined. Her teacher sent me a quick email that afternoon. Emily is doing fine. Some students asked about the mark on her face, and she simply said, there was a family problem, but my mom fixed it. Then she moved on. I couldn't have been prouder. Later that week, an unexpected message arrived in my inbox. An email from Catherine Foster, James's aunt. Rachel, it read, I wanted to check in on you and Emily. What happened at the party was unacceptable, and I admire your strength. For what it's worth, James has postponed the wedding. He says he needs time to think things through. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. I read her words twice, feeling a complex mix of relief, sadness, and cautious hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone in that family saw the truth. By the end of the week, a certified letter arrived, this time from my parents' attorney, threatening legal action over the restraining order I'd filed against Melissa. The language was cold and formal, hinting that pursuing this could have lasting implications for family relationships and your daughter's well-being. I forwarded it to the legal aid lawyer I'd consulted, who responded promptly, This is intimidation, not a valid legal argument. The restraining order was granted based on solid evidence. They're bluffing. Her words steadied me. That night, as Emily and I settled in for our bedtime routine, reading a book and talking about our day, she snuggled close and whispered, I'm glad you're my mom. My heart swelled with pride and love. In the weeks that followed, our home became a place of healing. Emily met with Dr. Bennett regularly, processing the trauma through art and play therapy. She grew stronger, more confident, and her laughter began to fill the apartment again. For me, therapy uncovered years of old wounds I had long buried. Memories of being the lesser daughter, the quiet one, the one expected to endure, not speak up. Dr. Bennett helped me see that what I had done wasn't just protecting Emily. It was breaking a pattern I had lived under for decades. My parents remained distant, refusing to acknowledge their role in the situation. Melissa, too, stayed silent, though through family whispers I heard she was in therapy, perhaps as part of a plea deal to avoid harsher penalties. James, for his part, sent a quiet message weeks later. I've ended my relationship with Melissa. The incident with Emily opened my eyes to a lot of things I had been ignoring. I'm sorry I didn't intervene sooner. Thank you for standing up for what was right. His words, though brief, felt like a small vindication. The weight of family expectation, once crushing, began to lift. I realized that the family I had always tried so hard to please no longer held the power to define me, or Emily. Together, we were building something stronger, a family on our terms, rooted in safety, respect, and love. Absolutely. Let's move on to Part 7, where we cover the family court hearing, the long-term consequences, and the first steps toward closure. Here's the rewritten version. The following Tuesday, Emily and I found ourselves in a small family courtroom. The atmosphere felt heavy, every word bouncing off the walls with more weight than usual. My parents were seated stiffly across the aisle, their attorney whispering to them as they avoided eye contact with us. Melissa was noticeably absent. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, reviewed the file in front of her. "The respondent's absence does not affect these proceedings," she said evenly. "We have sufficient evidence: photographs of the injury, video recordings, and multiple witness statements." The proceedings were brief but impactful. As the judge spoke, I noticed my parents glancing occasionally at Emily, but never directly at me. Their expressions were tight, guarded, as though they were clinging to the belief that this entire situation was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. The judge granted a 1-year restraining order, barring Melissa from contacting Emily in any way. No in-person visits, no phone calls, no messages through family members. A wave of relief washed over me, though I knew this wasn't the end. As we left the courtroom, my father finally approached. His voice was low, just above a whisper, and laced with frustration. "Rachel, this has gone too far. Your sister's career is hanging by a thread. Her engagement is in jeopardy. Are you really satisfied with what you've done?" I straightened, positioning myself protectively in front of Emily. "No, Dad. I'm not happy this happened. I'm heartbroken that my own sister would hurt my child, and I'm devastated that you and Mom chose to defend that behavior instead of standing up for Emily. But I'm not sorry for doing what's right." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Emily clutched my hand as we left the courthouse. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think Grandma and Grandpa are ever going to talk to us again?" I hesitated, then answered honestly, "I don't know, sweetheart. That depends on whether they're willing to understand what happened and make real changes. But no matter what, you and I will be okay." In the weeks that followed, life began to shift. Unexpected donations trickled into Emily's college fund, small amounts from anonymous sources, and one large, surprising check for $5,000 signed only with the initials CF. I had a hunch Catherine Foster was behind it, though she never said a word. Old family connections I hadn't heard from in years reached out, some offering support, others quietly admitting they had experienced the same favoritism and toxic family dynamics. My cousin Taylor confided over coffee that she had distanced herself from family events years ago because of how she had been treated. "They always made me feel like I wasn't enough," she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. "Watching you stand up for Emily gave me the courage to reconnect with the people who actually matter." Her words gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we were starting to break a cycle that had been quietly poisoning our family for generations. Then, about 6 weeks after the incident, an email arrived from James. "Rachel," it read, "I wanted you to hear this directly from me. I've ended my engagement with Melissa. What happened with Emily forced me to confront things I'd been ignoring for far too long. I've suggested that Melissa seek therapy, and I'm starting therapy myself to understand why I tolerated certain behaviors. I'm truly sorry for what Emily went through. Please know that I'm wishing the best for you both." I read the message twice, a quiet mix of emotions stirring inside me. It wasn't gloating, not satisfaction at someone else's downfall, but there was a sense of validation, a subtle confirmation that the truth had been seen, even by those who had once been blind to it. Therapy became a cornerstone for both Emily and me. Her sessions with Dr. Bennett continued, helping her process her feelings through gentle conversations and art. My own therapy, though, was more intense. Years of minimizing my own needs, of striving for family approval, of being the quiet one. Those patterns didn't unravel overnight. "You didn't break up your family," my therapist reminded me again and again. "You set a boundary against harmful behavior. They chose not to respect that boundary. That's on them, not you." It was hard to internalize, but slowly it started to stick. Professionally, there were unexpected turns as well. Dr. Washington called me into her office one afternoon with a small smile. "Rachel, we're promoting you to lead teacher for your grade level," she announced. "Your commitment to your students and your courage in advocating for what's right exemplify the values we want in leadership." For the first time in a long time, I felt not just seen, but valued. As the months unfolded, I began to rebuild a life that wasn't centered around my family's approval. Emily flourished too, becoming more assertive and confident, standing up for classmates when they were teased, and raising her hand without hesitation in class. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Absolutely. Let's continue with part 8, focusing on Melissa's letter, the family's gradual shifts, and Rachel's reflections on family and self-worth. Here's the rewritten version, keeping the 10% rephrasing consistent. 3 months after that unforgettable engagement party, an unexpected letter arrived in the mail. I recognized Melissa's neat handwriting immediately. My heart raced as I opened it, not sure what I'd find inside. Her words were measured, the tone more restrained than I had ever known her to be. "Rachel," she wrote, "I've been attending anger management therapy as part of my agreement with the prosecutor. At first, I only went because I had to, just another box to check. But the sessions forced me to look at myself in ways I never had before. I realize now that what I did to Emily was inexcusable. No child, no matter the circumstances, deserves to be hit. I'm not asking for forgiveness or for the restraining order to be lifted. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, and I hope one day I can be someone who never reacts with violence again." There were no excuses, no justifications, just an honest, raw acknowledgement of her wrongdoing. I brought the letter to my next therapy session. Dr. Bennett read it carefully, then looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "This is a meaningful step," she said. "It doesn't erase the harm, but it shows that Melissa is starting to take responsibility. Whether you choose to engage with her again is entirely your decision. You're not obligated to let her back in, but you can acknowledge her growth without compromising your own boundaries." It was a lot to take in. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time I felt like I had a choice, a real choice. Meanwhile, small but meaningful changes began to emerge in my relationship with my parents. After months of avoidance, they finally agreed to meet with Dr. Bennett to discuss supervised visits with Emily. The first session was tense. My father, in particular, seemed unwilling to admit that Melissa's actions had crossed a line. "In my day, a little discipline wasn't abuse," he grumbled. Dr. Bennett listened patiently, then responded calmly. "There's an important distinction between discipline, which teaches, and punishment, which harms. What happened at that engagement party wasn't discipline. It was an adult losing control and hurting a child who had already apologized for an accident." Surprisingly, my mother nodded slightly, as if something had finally clicked for her. She later admitted that their pastor had been helping them understand the difference between old-school parenting and abusive behavior. Progress was slow, but it was there. We arranged short supervised visits with Emily in public places, a park, a coffee shop, a museum. Always on my terms, always with clear boundaries. My parents were awkward, often unsure of how to navigate the new rules, but they respected them. For Emily's birthday, they gave her a handmade card with a heartfelt note, not excuses, just love. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Melissa and I, however, kept our distance. The restraining order remained in effect, and we both respected that boundary. Through family whispers, I heard she was still attending therapy, still working at a smaller firm after being let go from her previous job, and that she had started volunteering at a children's advocacy center as part of her community service. It wasn't lost on me that life had shifted dramatically since that night. I had lost the illusion of family harmony, but gained something far more important: a deep, unshakable understanding of my own strength and of Emily's. Catherine Foster, James's aunt, reached out again, inviting me for coffee. Over steaming mugs, she shared her perspective. "I watched my nephew nearly marry into a family dynamic I recognized all too well, one I lived through in my own first marriage. Watching you stand up for Emily gave me hope. Cycles can be broken, Rachel. It's hard, but it's possible." Her words stayed with me. James himself had moved out of state for a new job, but before he left, he sent a brief email checking in on Emily. "Your courage helped me find mine," he wrote. "I'll always be grateful for that wake-up call, painful as it was." At school, Emily blossomed. Her teacher told me she had become a quiet leader, advocating for classmates and volunteering for projects. The child who once worried about embarrassing adults now stood tall, knowing her voice mattered. My own career took a turn I never expected. The promotion to lead teacher gave me new challenges and opportunities. Where I once hesitated to speak up, I now did so with confidence, knowing that protecting and advocating for children was not just my job, it was my purpose. For months, Emily and I built a life that was ours alone, unshackled from the toxic family dynamics that had once defined us. We found joy in small things: art projects, bike rides, silly dance parties in our living room. And while I knew the road ahead wouldn't be without bumps, I also knew this: we were enough, just us. As the months passed, life gradually settled into a new rhythm, one that felt calmer, freer, and more honest than I had ever imagined. Emily and I established fresh traditions: courage celebrations on the anniversary of the engagement party, where we marked the strength it took to stand up for what's right. We'd have a special dinner, exchange small tokens, like a tiny lion charm for Emily to remind her of her bravery, and talk openly about what we had learned. On one of those evenings, over plates of spaghetti and garlic bread, Emily looked up at me thoughtfully. "Mom, do you think Aunt Melissa will ever be part of our family again?" she asked quietly. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. That depends on a lot of things. Whether she continues to work on herself, whether she truly understands why what she did was wrong, and most importantly, how you feel about seeing her again. We don't have to decide now, or ever, really. We'll do what's right for us." Emily nodded slowly, processing that. "I think I'd be okay seeing her someday. But not yet. And only if you're there too." "Absolutely," I reassured her, feeling a deep wave of love and pride. In the spring, we started reconnecting with extended family. My cousin Taylor began visiting regularly with her kids for playdates. My mother's sister, who had distanced herself from family gatherings years ago, reached out after hearing what had happened. "I always saw how they treated you," she confided during one of her visits. "I tried to speak up once, but your mother cut me off for months. I should have done more. I'm sorry." Her apology, though overdue, felt genuine, and I accepted it. One afternoon, a formal letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from Melissa's therapist, requesting a meeting to discuss a possible restorative conversation. The letter was careful to state that I wasn't obligated to participate, and that Melissa was taking full responsibility for her actions. After careful thought and discussion with both my therapist and Emily, I agreed to a preliminary conversation, without Emily present. We met in the therapist's office, a neutral space that somehow made it feel less fraught. Melissa looked different, more subdued, almost fragile. She spoke quietly, acknowledging the hurt she had caused and the patterns she was beginning to see in her own behavior. "I grew up believing I had to be perfect," she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. "That I could control the world around me, that anger was strength. I see now that it's not. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or for us to go back to the way things were. I just needed to say I'm sorry, truly, and that I'm working hard to make sure I never lash out like that again." I listened, feeling the weight of years of family dysfunction lift slightly. Not gone, but lighter. We didn't hug, and we didn't make promises about the future. But there was a quiet understanding that this was a first step, not a resolution. As the 1-year mark approached, I reflected on how far Emily and I had come. I no longer lived in the shadow of my family's judgment. I no longer measured my worth by their approval. Emily, once the quiet, hesitant child, had blossomed into a girl who knew her boundaries and trusted that I would always protect them. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she asked me, "Mom, are you glad the punch spilled on Aunt Melissa's dress?" I smiled gently, brushing a curl away from her face. "No, sweetheart, I'm not glad that happened. I wish it hadn't, but I'm grateful for what we learned from it. We learned that standing up for ourselves can be hard, but it's always the right thing to do. We learned that family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shows up for you with love, respect, and kindness. And we learned that our worth doesn't come from other people's approval. It comes from knowing who we are and standing up for what's right. Emily nodded, her eyes thoughtful. I think the family we're building is just right for us. I kissed her forehead, a wave of peace washing over me. Me too, sweetie, me too. As I turned off her light and closed her door, I felt an unfamiliar sense of calm settle over me. A quiet knowing that we were enough exactly as we were. The road ahead might still have bumps, but we would navigate it together, with courage and love guiding the way.